to the June 4th edition of the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series, brought to you by the National Urban League. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson, president of the Harlem, New York-based diversity recruitment firm East Coast Executives. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Lock in and join our family in the chat and tell us where you're from, please. You know what? It's the NBA Finals weekend. If you're riding with OKC or Indy, you can tell us that as well. But here on the Digital Career Success Series, DCSS, we are a professional development series that helps members of our Urban League Young Professional chapters and other diverse job seekers develop new skill sets that will enhance their careers through digital platforms such as webinars, Facebook, and Instagram Live. The goal is to provide an opportunity for professional development right from one's computer. If you want more, visit us at nuljobsnetwork.com. All right, I see the energy in the chat. Let's get started here. Today's DCSS, Emotional Intelligence in Action, Elevating Relationships and Performance, features Dr. V. Johnson and Alvin Hagen. All right, Dr. V, let's get it. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hello, I am Dr. V. Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of the EQ Doctor and Locus Strategy, which is a strategic advisory firm where I specialize in emotional intelligence strategy for high stakes professionals, companies, and organizations. And I would say my work blends presence and perception and emotional intelligence to help others be felt the way they intended without shrinking, softening, or performing.
And Dr. V, I'm really excited to have you here. All right, you're not going to do this and not tell them the moniker. You're not going to tell them who you are out here in this world.
I am the EQ Doctor.
Yes, the EQ Doctor is in the building. Also in the building today, representing the Digital Career Success Series, Alvin Hagen. Alvin, please tell our audience a little bit about yourself, sir.
Hello, everyone. Before I start, I just want to say that everything I'm about to say is on behalf of myself and not of my previous employer or my current employer. With that being said, my name is Alvin Hagen, and no, I am not a chipmunk, even though my mother used to say, Alvin, back in the day, which was totally embarrassing. My job, I believe, as an organizational change management principal is to create conditions for people to succeed. And I do that by using change management strategies to secure superior results that drive return on investment and also cost saving reduction. I'm excited to be here, and I'll be remiss for not saying that I'm also happily married to my beautiful wife, and we have 2 beautiful children as well.
Well, we appreciate you being here as well. I hope the family's tuned in, the little people watching Dad do his thing, because that's exactly what we plan on doing today. Listen, I'd like to get right into the conversation. We spoke a little during the run-throughs about skill set and strategy, right? So both of you guys were kind of aligned in sharing that EQ is more than just skill set, right? Am I correct here? It's strategy, indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Dr. V, chime in on that philosophy.
So I think people tend to think of emotional intelligence as a set of personality traits, like if you're calm or friendly, but I tend to think of it really about knowing what to do with what you're feeling, right? Like your thoughts and emotions, and not just your own, but the thoughts and emotions of others, especially in the workplace. And EQ helps you to make all these decisions, right? And know when to push and to pause. And so if you think about emotional intelligence as a way to navigate moments strategically, it'll help you reframe how you think about emotional intelligence.
You know, reframing is an important piece of the conversation, right? Especially if you're talking skill set and strategy, because sometimes it's modular. It's a moving target. Am I right here, Alvin? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on skill set and strategy in this conversation.
Yeah, I believe it's more than a flex. I believe it's a strategy for winning at life. And so it's like a cheat code for understanding people and navigating chaos, right? So if you're able to have emotional intelligence, you're able to go into rooms where most people are not really thinking about the other things people are doing. So from an emotional intelligence perspective, we have to really think about not only ourselves, but also the people around us. And so that's what I would believe from that perspective.
So thinking about the people around us, and as I was reading through the deck here, and I'm like, wow, you know, we're having this conversation about, you know, it being more than a skill set, it being a strategy. When does this take place? Like when do people start kind of strategizing around their EQ let's call it language. Is there a way to approach it that really is strategic? Dr. V?
I think there is a way. I mean, to answer your question, it actually starts when we're young, when we're kids. Those skills start very early on, like on the playground early. And so as adults, I think it's a little bit more challenging, right? But it's particularly important to start when you are navigating both personal and professional relationships, because it can't just be about you. So as you start to think more about your own thoughts and feelings and emotions and how they impact your decisions and your relationships, that's when you start to learn more about what it is that works and what doesn't work.
Work and not work. So it's about self-awareness, right? We're talking about self-awareness. We're talking about reducing resistance. Alvin, I want you to come in on this next slide. This topic seems to be really important, and maybe we'll stay here for a while. But self-awareness reduces resistance, right? So talk to us a little bit about that philosophy, please.
Yeah, this is really big for me, especially from a change management perspective of what I do. And I believe it's like having a backstage pass in the back of your mind, right? And so you're thinking about basically really about what resistance is, which is really fear. When you boil it down to it, a lot of resistance is just fear. And so having self-awareness can improve you having that fear of whatever it is. One of the major key people from a historical perspective that talked about this was W.E.B. Du Bois, when he talked about the double consciousness of a Negro. He talked about basically that there was this two-ness, where we have this awareness, not only just being aware of what's going on, but also aware of ourselves as African Americans. And so this is something that is always something that is stirring in our minds. And I think it's just really important for us, especially in the corporate world or in any type of workplace environment, to be able to be aware of the things that are going on around us and also within us as well.
Yeah, I can appreciate that philosophy. I want to go back just a little as we speak about this particular segment of it. Do either of you have, as I've spoken to people about this, I've done some workshops, sat on some panels around this topic, and it seems like people have varied definitions of EQ. And I'm just wondering, Dr. V, if you can kind of hone in and basically share kind of your, I guess, top of the line definition for emotional intelligence, EQ.
Sure. I mean, I look at emotional intelligence as being aware of your thoughts and emotions and the thoughts and emotions of other people in order to have a positive relationships. So I like to say that there are only two outcomes in any interaction, and that is a positive one and a negative one. And most of us don't go into any interaction thinking, I want to have a negative interaction. So the more you're aware of yourself and your behaviors, and the more you can be aware of those around you and how you intertwine, then that is, in theory, emotional intelligence.
I got you. Alvin, I want you to chime in as well before we get to the next slide and kind of speak about, in your experiences, how you came to define EQ.
I want to go back to what Dr. V talked about in regards to your upbringing, because I think my father was one who was able to show me emotional intelligence. As a military man, he was able to show that, taking care of my mother when she has sickle cell, that, what emotional intelligence was. I got to see that day in and day out. With that being said, I believe it's more so understanding your triggers, your biases, and also your emotional reactions to things, right? Because this is something that is deep for a lot of individuals, especially in the work environment, is that we have to understand what we are reacting towards. Instead of reacting, we can respond. Instead of, being triggered, we can actually be able to say, let me pause for a moment and evaluate. And I think that's really important from an emotional intelligence perspective.
Yeah, I think that's important as well. And it sounds like you're speaking a lot about regulation, how we're regulating ourselves as we kind of dive into interacting with other people. So regulation strengthens resilience. Dr. V, that's such a strong statement. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, good segue, Alvin, for sure. So, I think regulation really isn't about suppressing how you feel. And I think that's a misconception about emotional intelligence, right? So it's not about suppressing how you feel. It's really about being able to manage your response, as Alvin said. And really, you want to manage it long enough to make a better choice in whatever it is that you're doing. And I think we've all had moments where we're triggered, whether it's by an email, a tone, someone's microaggression. And our first instinct isn't always the one that serves us the best. And so having the ability to pause and ground yourself, that will help you be more effective in the moment. And that's what emotional intelligence helps us to do. So it's holding it together where we don't get set off, right? And it's not about ignoring our emotions. It's really about knowing when and how to use them effectively. And I would also say that it helps us to bounce back faster without damaging the relationships or even your reputation in a lot of cases.
Yes, indeed. It's the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. We're on today with Dr. V. Johnson and Alvin Hagen. We're talking about emotional intelligence. And you cannot talk about emotional intelligence without talking about motivation. So when we go to the next slide here, motivation accelerates momentum. So we're kind of speeding through this conversation. So we've built some momentum here, but I know we're talking about motivating people in the workplace. This is a professional development conversation. So let's kind of talk about this from the standpoint of career, professional development, and accomplishments and achievements. Alvin, can you chime in on motivation and how it accelerates momentum, please, sir?
Yes. First of all, I might have to say this, and I know I'm going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but it was shown when the Indiana Pacers beat the New York Knicks in their basketball game. I just had to throw that jab at you.
Hey, you know what? And I'm looking here. We've got a lot of people from New York on, a lot of people from Maryland on, so I'm sure we got some Indy fans floating around, but we'll take the heat off of you on that one.
Absolutely. But really, when motivation to me is the spark, but momentum is what creates a wildfire, right? Momentum is something that keeps it going. And a lot of times what I see, especially in corporate America, is that you see a lot of people have the motivation, they're excited, but they don't have the duration. They don't continue to go on that journey, right? And I think that sustainment is the fire that continues to allow motivation to excel, right? And I think when I look at people who were motivated, I'll go back to people in sports. As I was a former sports player myself, I'll think about Serena Williams, right? And her prime example was her biggest quote. She said something like I think a champion is defined not by their wins, but she said they're defined by how they recover when they fall. To me, that shows me that when you're from a motivation perspective, it's not about just having to win. It's about how you get back up. It's the resilience that you have, right? That keeps that momentum. And especially in corporate America, where you have a lot of things that may set you back, from adversities to things that are on the job that may be a boss that you may have had or things of that nature, you need to have that resilience to accelerate yourself and keep going.
Dr. V, you want to chime in here?
She's on mute.
You're on mute.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. What I would add is, especially in the workplace, and if you are a leader or you're looking into getting into leadership, right, it's really important that you're able to gauge how those around you are feeling. And so how are they motivated? So if you're in a position where you have a team member who is checked out, then you want to ask, like, what is it going to take for them to feel re-engaged? Because as Alvin said, that's the motivator. It's the push. It's the fire behind you that keeps you going. So it's not about assigning more work to a person. It really is about finding what their drivers are so that they are motivated to do the work and get it done. And if you're personally struggling, I would say instead of forcing this sense of productivity, it's really important to connect with your bigger goals to help you get grounded and to find your why.
Speaking about why, when we tagged this conversation, we titled it as Emotional Intelligence in Action, right? So elevating relationships and performance. Let's talk a little bit about that, Alvin. I know you've been entrenched in corporate life, right? And in leadership roles and in change management situations. How are people effective from an EQ standpoint with motivating the performance of either their peers or, in some people's situations, it's the people that are reporting directly to them. But, we get a lot of conversations about even motivating or managing your manager, right? So talk to us a little bit about those levels of EQ and how they come into play when you're kind of motivating performance.
Yeah, when you're motivating performance, I think first of all, you have to take a look at yourself first. I think a lot of times people want to go outward and say, well, this person's not doing this, rather than looking within. I think it's really important to understand that once you look within, you can't cast any stones at someone else in regards to their performance, because you have to work on yourself first. But after you do that work for yourself, then it's time for you to actually start being able to motivate others. And the way I believe that motivation for others should start is basically by understanding the needs and the want of the individual, right? And so every person is different. You may have one person who is motivated because they have a family. You may have another person who's motivated just because of the cash, right? They're ready to get paid and they're going to do whatever it takes. And some people may have a nightlife or whatever they want to do. But find out what that motivation is and be able to harness that into a conversation so you can be able to talk about how we can come together and create a productive environment. And that environment has to be created with a psychologically safe space, right? And I think a lot of times what happens, especially from a corporate America perspective, we tell people what to do, but we don't provide a safe space for people to be able to reply to us and have a conversation about it. And that's really important because if you're able to have that safe space, they feel safe enough to be able to disagree with you. And that's okay, especially with me. I love it when people disagree. I love it because that means that they're engaged, they're having a conversation, and they're ready to do this. And so that for me is really important. And I think it creates that regulation from that perspective.
Dr. V, let's talk about that a little from your perspective, because you come from learning in educational environments, right? And I know that everything can be a learning experience, but you were specifically tasked with people and culture as well. So you're in a space where you really have to take a look at that and guide and manage accordingly. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what you've seen to be effective in those spaces?
Yeah, I will keep it simple by saying relationships matter. I think a lot of times we look at the workplace as being strictly transactional, right? And it's just not that. I think once upon a time it was that, but people are showing up to jobs in their more human, real selves with real baggage, with real emotions, and gone are the days where we get to just overlook people and their feelings. And so the more we approach that from a relational aspect, right, back to what Alvin even talked about, people want to feel like you hear them. People want to feel like they're understood. They want to feel like you care. And so when you start there, that's when you help to build the space where there is trust, where people feel like they're psychologically safe, where they feel like you are wanting them to show up as their best selves at work. And at the end of the day, when people can show up as their best selves, there really is a true return on investment. You have happier, employees, and you're helping to meet those metrics. So we have to get back to relationships matter at work.
I guess this is a good time to say that if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section or in the comment section. We will star them and try to get to them during our Q&A segment here on the Digital Career Success Series. Alvin, I'm listening to what Dr. V is talking about, and it sounds like she's talking about empathy. She's talking about kind of understanding where people are coming from, or just at least giving grace as people continue to deal with just bringing their full selves to work and kind of operating in that space. So let's talk about how empathy ignites engagement.
Yeah, engagement is the name of the game, right? I think a lot of times we think about, leadership or anything of that nature from a business perspective, is that how do you create that? And you have to create it with a sense of empathy. People are attracted to people who actually show empathy to others, right? It's like, if I ask you how you were doing, that opens up a conversation. Right. It's like, hey, this person's actually caring. Now, not just to say hi, how are you doing, pass away, but more so really take them by the side and say, hey, how are you really doing? That actually shows that you care. And I think Maya Angelou had a quote that says, people know you as much as something in regards to how much you care. Have you show that? And so I think that's really important. And I think not only is it important, I think it's vital, especially in this environment. where now you see a lot of leaders, especially that are, C-level, that may think that it's all about financial gain. It's not just about that anymore. It's more so now, if you want to lead an organization, you're going to also have to lead with the people, or they'll revolt, just like we've seen from a Target perspective. So we have to see that as well.
So Dr. V, if empathy ignites engagement, then a lack of empathy, what's the opposite side of that, right? Does that shut engagement down?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite literally the opposite. It's disengagement, right? Because people want to feel understood. They don't want to feel managed. They want, as Alvin said, they want to feel connected, right? And involved. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a really misunderstood competency, because it's not about absorbing people's emotions or taking on their burdens, right? It's just doing enough to really recognize what somebody else might be holding. And that could be as simple as, if you're working on the same project at work and, something is off, somebody's off task, and just actually asking them, hey, like, what's making this harder than it needs to be for you? And listening without necessarily thinking that you have to fix it, but also be willing to roll up your sleeves and help to fix it, right? Because that is empathy in action when we talk about what happens on the workplace. Or, as Alvin mentioned before, if someone's disagreeing with you publicly, I mean, number one, it does mean they're engaged in some way. But I think instead of reacting, you could say things like, I hear that, and let's talk more about this, because it means that I'm willing to listen to what it is that you have to say. I'm willing to listen to your perspective.
Dr. B, I want to stay here with you for a second. How do people improve in that area? Like, is that something people come to the table with, or can you really work on being more empathetic?
You can work on empathy. I think that it is something that a lot of times innate is within people, but I do think you can work on it. And one of the easiest way, I'll say easiest and maybe not easiest way, is to ask for feedback. And I think it's really hard to give and receive feedback. But if you really are a person that wants to improve, you can communicate that, and you can say, hey, listen, I want to know more about how I'm showing up. And you can ask for feedback. And then what you have to do is take the feedback, though. It might feel a little harsh, right? You might feel a type of way, but just use that feedback to improve each time. It's not about like getting all the way to the finish line with it, but it really is about making small steps toward improvement.
So small steps toward improvement. Alvin, listen, can people, same question to you. How do people improve on empathy? How do people develop that skill set?
So this is something dear to me, because I think this is important, especially for African-American men. I think we have an opportunity here. I think when it comes to empathy, to improve on that, most of the times we have been taught historically just to be able to kind of be strong. And we think that strength is basically not showing emotion. Matter of fact, I saw a Pivot podcast with Shaquille O'Neal that talked about, he said that he doesn't show emotion. And they were looking at him like, why don't you show emotion? He was like, well, I see that as kind of like a weakness. And in my head, I was thinking, he's like, well, it might be a problem for me later down the line. And I'm like, yeah, it could be, because you know what? This can cause some issues if we don't really address the elephant in the room, right? And I think when it comes to empathy, what we need to do is be able to, first of all, do some psychological help. I think that's really important. And a lot of times we're scared to have those kind of conversations with someone who is a doctor in psychology that can be able to talk to us and do the therapy that works. And I think that is really important for us, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, I think that's important as well. I guess that's why we have the EQ doctor on the Digital Career Success Series today, because this is the work she does, right? So listen, Dr. V, let's talk a little bit about this, right? So what I'm hearing Alvin speak about in relationship to empathy is that social skills can kind of carry you through, or at least into, some of those conversations. So how do social skills drive alignment in the areas that we're speaking about?
Yeah, I like to say with social skills, the first thing I say is read the room. First and foremost, you have to know how you're showing up. That's just always the beginning. That's the start. And I also want to say, because I'm an introvert, people don't necessarily believe that, but like, you can have strong social skills and still be an introvert. It's not anything to do with being the life of a party. it really means that you're able to move in and out of spaces. You're able to read the room. You can make things easier and not harder. And this social skill idea really is about you understanding group dynamics, right? And being able to adjust in real time. Earlier on, I said that there are only two types of interaction. There's a positive one and there's a negative one. And so how you're able to really read the room is going to determine if this is going to be positive or negative. So as an example, I'm sure all of us or many of us can relate to this, that you're in a meeting, right? And the meeting is derailed. Like somebody says something that's kind of off the wall and you're like, well, how did we get here? So it's really easy to go back to what was the purpose of this meeting? You can be that person and say, hey, like, it seems like we got derailed a little bit. Let's go back to the purpose of this meeting. You can clarify instructions. You can summarize the next steps to help bring people back together, because it's more than just how you show up in the space. It's the group dynamics. It's every single person that's sitting around the table that's impacting the way this social situation is playing out.
You know, you caught me with the whole you being an introvert thing. I'm going to sit on that for a little while. I've had several conversations with you, and that's the thing I do not get, right? So I'm gonna leave that there. Alvin, you know what? I don't come and claim you're an introvert as well. Please don't do this to me, right? Let's talk a little bit about what Dr. V is talking about. I know you spoke about the social skills in relationship to the conversation that happened with On the Pivot, which is great, right? But how do people shake that off to still continue to drive alignment? I want to stay here for a second.
Yeah, I think when we talk about social skill, I think you need to come from a place of curiosity. I think a lot of times we come from a place of just, thinking that this is what they did because of X, Y, Z, rather than saying, why did they do this? And have that kind of conversation, because I think that's really important, especially when you're in business environments, to be curious. And I find that having that curiosity allows you to be able to have conversations and drive that alignment. Not only that, I think it allows you to be like a maestro. So you're able to navigate rooms and create have everyone to be in the same symphony, which is really important. And John Baptiste is one of my favorite artists from New Orleans. He has a concept called the social music, which he was built on the idea of unifying force, that breaking barriers of shared experiences. And I think when we talk about business, what's really important is how do we create shared experiences that people can resonate with each other? And I think that's really important, especially for African-American, Brown, Latino individuals, to be able to have shared experiences so that we can move together instead of moving apart from each other.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And I also appreciate our audience here. Listen, this is the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. We're on with Alvin Hagen, the EQ doctor, Dr. V. Johnson. You can see this and all of our Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series by visiting the Urban League Jobs Network YouTube channel. I'm sure they'll drop the actual link in the chat, but please stay in tune with this conversation and all of our other conversations here on the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. All right, look, let's keep it moving. We talked about social skills driving alignment, right? But social skills, high performance, and just recalibrating in certain situations often pays dividends, right? So let's talk about how all of that requires an emotional recalibration, right? High performance tied into recalibrating in the workplace. Dr. V, I want to hone in on what you have to say about this.
Yeah, high level performance takes a lot. It takes a lot of times physically, emotionally, spiritually. And at the end of the day, it's really easy to burn out. And so you have to be aware of your emotions so that you can recalibrate before something falls off the rails, right? And too many of us operate at a high level, and then before we know it, we are burnt out. And so it takes us asking when and what do we need to adjust before we hit the wall. And again, that's a strategy. It also helps us keep our teams from burning out. So when you're in a high velocity, high impact work environment where teams are working in overdrive, it's really important to check the temperature of your teams as well. Do those emotional check-ins, which typically high performers skip, right? They're all about the end goal, like how do I just get there? And so it's really important that you do that so that you can stop those things from breaking down. It's important to notice when energy is off, right? Like, why is my team not performing when they're typically high performers? And a lot of times that will be a signal that there needs to be some sort of emotional recalibration.
All right, I need your help here. So this kind of resonates with me. I spoke to a gentleman yesterday, and 30 seconds into the conversation, I could tell his energy was off, right? So I kind of stopped the business part of the conversation and just said, hey, man, your energy seems a little off today. Anything you want to share? And he shared a conversation about what he was going through on that particular day. Actually, that moment, something that happened maybe 30 minutes prior to our call. I felt like I couldn't offer much other than just listening. Is that okay?
Yeah, like I'm with you, Alvin. I want to clap too. This is what I mean. When I go back to long gone are the days where everything is transactional, it's relational. So even though, you know, this conversation happened, you were attuned enough, which kudos to you, number one, right? And that's all it takes for a lot of people. They just want somebody to ask. And even if they don't want to share, I guarantee you the shoulders just relax a little bit, like I can breathe and somebody asked. And just to be able to share and create that space, like Alvin said, safe space, right? For people to just share what they're going through. And Kenneth, you might have been the only person who asked him, like, who even saw him, and you don't know what shift that may have made in his life.
Yeah, you know, I hope it was a positive thing. Alvin, any advice for individuals on either side of that dynamic, right? What are we to do?
So first of all, I wanted to talk about something called John Henryism. That actually describes like Black individuals that push themselves to succeed despite adversity and often at the expense of their own health. And what happens, especially in our race, we go for the goal. We're going to go at it. We're going to go hard and we're going to keep pushing. But what happens is because of that, we lose our health. And so you start seeing hypertension, you start seeing diabetes, you start seeing anxiety. All these things happen because of the fact that we're not focused holistically on ourselves. Instead, we're just focused on one goal. And so I recommend that you have a holistic view of success. So that it's not just more so based off of just the end goal. It's based on the journey that has your health, your spiritual health, all those things that need to go into play, rather than just one executing a goal for a career. Because at the end of the day, when your tombstone, they're not going to say, "Oh, he was a great boss." They're not going to say that, right? So you have to make sure that you're doing well for yourself and make sure that you're taking care of you. And that's really important.
Extremely important. So let's talk about this. The next slide here, please, where we discuss EQ not being about softening, right, who we are, really kind of sharpening how we show up in spaces, right? And I guess this can be consistently through, we're talking about work environments here. And you know, when I first saw this slide, I kind of paused and thought about it. And I know people work for consistency, but maybe that's unfair to all that are involved, right? Remaining consistent. Sometimes you have to kind of soften who you are to really understand who you're working with. Dr. V, do you have anything about this particular conversation, this particular slide that may kind of align with how you feel?
For sure. I feel like when people hear emotional intelligence, they feel like it is about being softer. They feel like it's about being agreeable, or you have to be the peacekeeper, or you have to tone yourself down. And that's not it at all. Emotional intelligence is really what allows you to show up with clarity and allows you to show up as your best self, right? And it helps you to create the conditions where you no longer have to shrink. You don't have to stretch. You don't have to code switch. You don't have to do those things, or really even to have to constantly explain yourself, because what you've now done is you realize who you are. And so you're able to present your best self outwardly. It allows you to be received clearly because going back to reading the room, you understand who it is that you're speaking to. It's not about you changing who you are. It's really about making sure that people don't misread you. And it's not easy. Like I will never tell you that being an emotionally intelligent person is easy because it's not. It's constant work. But again, it's not about making you less of something or softer or any of those things. It's about you designing the you that resonates outward to the people that you're talking to.
All right, you know what? Let's have kind of a gender discussion here in a sense, right? So when you come in, there are some conversations out here taking place around corporate women, specifically Black women in corporate America, and the way they're perceived, right? So how do you use this? And Alvin, I'm going to ask a very similar question of you, but Dr. V, do you adjust for that? Do you accommodate for that, or do you just continue to kind of stay consistent along all lines?
I stay consistent. The best thing you can do is to be who you are. You can be authentic. Now, I will speak to the women out here, right? There's research that says that women shouldn't smile as much as we do because when you're seen as smiling, it seems like you're too nice. And there's also research that says that women should wear more makeup. And so I don't ascribe to any of that. I'm not a makeup wearer. I smile, like I do. But again, my advice is to be who you are, because if you can't be who you are in the room, then it's not the right room. And I always say that. I say, don't change who you are, just go to a different room, go have a seat at a different table, because you should not have to shape shift no matter your gender or how you perform or how you identify to feel like you have to be in the room. But I will definitely say that there's gender bias for sure of how you show up in spaces, but it's not your job to shift to match those perceptions.
Come on, that's what I'm talking about. Drop your questions in the Q&A. It's the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. Kenneth L. Johnson, Dr. V. Now we're going to tap in with Alvin Hagen. Alvin, people don't know, our audience doesn't know, Alvin's literally sitting on the floor right now. He's 6'6". So when you walk into a room, you have a presence, and there's probably an expectation around that presence. 6'6", African-American male coming into a room in a leadership role. Tell us how you're navigating some of that and maybe kind of showing up as your true self in those spaces when people may be looking and expecting something completely different.
Yeah, first I would say that I had to become my authentic self first. I think when I first started in corporate America, I was not my authentic self. I was what they wanted me to be, right? And so I tried to play that role of, do this and do that and, don't speak here and that. And then I realized I was like, that's not me. I remember me and my wife had a really great conversation about that. She was like, you have to be you. Be the person that we know you are. And once I became that person, that's when I became the shine. That's when I was really, I can smile and everybody knows that I smile a lot. That's just my thing. But it was just, at that time, I didn't know that I could be that. I didn't have the courage to be that, right? But it took that to own my own self and have that sense of agency. And then also being able to understand that I'm not shrinking myself, but I'm actually expanding to own the room. Right. And so you have to be able to own your own room so that you can go into places with confidence. And when people see that you're confident, they are attracted towards you. And I think that's what we have to show with emotional intelligence is that you're intelligent enough to be able to know when to speak, when to be reserved, when to be able to have conversations, when to be able to speak up and when there's a different situation going on. I think we have an opportunity to be able to do that better because I see people who, even for myself, I work on it constantly. I always ask myself, what can I have done differently? But it's something that, like I said before, you have to own your own authentic self and be able to move and groove to your own beat of your drum.
Man, I love it. And I love the way you're doing it. And I believe you're doing it well, which is why we have you here on the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. I think this is a great time to go into our Q&A segment. We got a ton of them here, so we're going to try to get to as many as possible. Thank you all so very much for dropping your questions in the Q&A. Please keep them coming. Listen, we got a question from Bill. I'm going to just start right here. He's recently been seeing a lot of instances in the workplace where folks don't know how to read the room, whether that's a bull in a china shop mentality or exercising privilege because of skin tone or education, and it creates bad energy. Any advice on that? I know it's kind of a statement, but do you guys have anything you'd like to share in regards to those particular situations and or scenarios and how one should deal with it? Let's start with the bull in the china room situation when you're on the opposite side of that. Dr. V?
I would say that it's important of how you internalize it, right? Because at the end of the day, the only thing that we have complete control over is ourselves. And so how are you internalizing that, right? I'm not going to say that it's not aggravating. You might not you go home and you think about it, right? But I don't want you to do that either. I really want you to leave it there, because the thing that we lose sometimes is that it's not about us. So I would say don't internalize it, right? If you have opportunities to pour back into that person in some way, either by modeling the right behavior, that's helpful. If you could model the right behavior, then do that. But ultimately, do not internalize that, because it's not yours to carry.
Definitely not, right? So with that being said, I guess that applies for both sides of that conversation, right? You got the bull in the china room, and then maybe you have somebody that's kind of more passive. But Alvin, let's talk about the passive aggressive behavior that comes into the workplace. That's not one of the questions, but now I'm interested in your answer on that side of it.
I love that you're keeping it real, especially when it comes to passive aggressiveness. I think when you find, first of all, sometimes most people don't read the passive aggressiveness because they don't really know that it exists, because they think that it's it's the wink after the conversation, and so what I find with that is that I don't play into that anymore. I'm not one of those people that like to play into passive aggressiveness. So I like to not confront it, but say it in a way is like, help me understand what you mean by that, so that I can be able to have a conversation rather than say, what do you mean about that? That's really aggressive. But if you say, can you help me understand what you mean by that? Now we can have a conversation, because I'm pulling you up. We're having a conversation, but at the same time, now you have to explain yourself, right? And then that's a coaching moment, right? So that's a coaching moment that we can have a conversation about, okay, so I know this is what you meant, but here's what it's going to this is what we need to really talk about in general, so that we can have a better relationship going further. So I think really just being able to have that conversation with the individual is really important.
Wow, love it. Love the answer. So we have another question. When is it okay to say I've had enough? There are workplace cultures where resilience isn't enough to stay. But when is it okay? So I guess I've had enough means leaving that particular workplace. And let's talk about this a little. I don't know if the individual means stay in that environment, meaning that particular room, or stay at that organization. So let's just talk about it. When you're forced to quit a job, that might be the extreme on that side of it. So let's just talk about staying in the room. Dr. V?
I mean, I guess this response goes for either one. I don't recommend anyone staying anywhere, doing anything that negatively impacts your nervous system. So where you have a visceral reaction, your body physically responds in a negative way to showing up to your job, to being in the room, that's a problem. And unless you're in a position where you can change that from a change management leadership level, you shouldn't subject yourself consistently to that. I'm not telling you to leave your job tomorrow unless you know what you're going to do next, right? But I'm going to tell you that that's not healthy for you, whereas somebody else might be able to navigate that. It's clear that you cannot. And emotional intelligence is not a substitute for ensuring that you are in a healthy, safe work environment for you.
Alvin?
The best thing I've always was told was to take notes, right? So when you have situations like that, make sure that you are taking notes. Make sure that you have documentation of everything that's going on, especially in that environment, so that you'll be able to have a conversation with the ombudsman or those, HR that needs to be, so that you can be able to say, hey, here's the situation that I'm going through, and these are some of the things that I feel that is really impacting me, and I want to know how I can be able to do to overcome this situation. And I think that's really important, especially in corporate America, where you're dealing with managers that might not be the best, or individuals that might not be the best as well.
Alvin, let's stay there, because the next question is, they'd like for both of you actually to address how some of their insights could work for folks who are neurodivergent. So I think that's a good segue to what you were just speaking about. So you want to stay in the conversation. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so neurodivergent individuals definitely have a different perspective, especially from a diverse lens. And I think it's really important to understand, first of all, to communicate to that person who's your superior that you are neurodivergent. I think because most of the time you cannot see a neurodivergent individual. So you may not even know that one person is neurodivergent. So they might think that you're just acting out of order when really you're not. And so, first of all, having that conversation is important, and so that you can be able to educate them on what that is. So then they can have a sense of empathy for you. And I think that's really important.
You know what? I never even thought about not assuming they know what that is, right? So you need to make sure that you're both speaking about the same thing before you engage in the conversation about it. Dr. B, let's take the deep dive. Come on, all that education. I know you got something to say about this.
Yeah, no, I agree with Alvin completely. And as someone who is neurodivergent, I can particularly relate to that. And I agree it's often invisible. It's invisible labor, and many times it's an invisible struggle as well. And I also want to name that, you may not feel safe sharing that, right? And so how do you navigate it? And it really goes back to yourself. I would always recommend that if it's something that is challenging for you to be able to navigate on your own, if your employer offers some sort of coaching, right? That's a part of a perk where you work. Or if you are able to work with an individual to help you navigate that, I think it's really important. I would always say to talk to someone who is trusted, who does understand perhaps what it is that you're going through. And something that I personally do is reflect. So every day I'm reflecting on my experience, right? What it is that I need to do the next day to show up as my best self. What that's related to my neurodivergence was a struggle for me that day. And so that I can go back and show up differently or make a small tweak the next day. I would say just know that it's a personal journey, right? And do the things that are going to make you feel like your best self, where you don't feel like your neurodivergence is a hindrance or a barrier or a struggle, because I know from day to day that it can. So most importantly, find the resources that work for you so that you can show up as your best self on your job.
All right, excellent. Next question here. Can you be too emotionally intelligent? How do you manage that? In other words, prevent allowing your empathy to overtake your life and derail your own productivity. And I'll just add, in the workplace. Alvin?
I don't think you can be too emotionally intelligent. I think I think sometimes people may make you feel that way, but I don't really think that you can be too emotionally intelligent. But I do think what you can be is a person who overanalyzes things to a point where you get to a point where there's no resolve, right? And I think that's really important, is to be able to resolve issues. And so for me, I don't believe that you can be too emotionally intelligent, because people need people to have empathy. People need that type of conversation, because believe it or not, most of the times in the workplace, you rarely see it. You rarely see it at all. And if you find someone that does do it, they really gravitate towards that individual. So that's just my perspective on that.
Dr. V.
I agree with Alvin. I would add that I don't think you can be too emotionally intelligent. What I think you might need more of are boundaries, And I think that's particularly challenging, especially with people who are highly empathetic or highly sensitive to the things that other people are going through. Typically, you need boundaries. It's hard sometimes to toe the line of what somebody's experiencing or feeling. And so if you need a North Star when you have a high level of empathy, think about the goal and the outcome. And so as you're empathizing with someone, try to understand how is it impacting the outcome. And so how can I create the right conditions so that we can still get to the end goal while honoring what it is that somebody's going through or what somebody's feeling or what the experience entails.
Dr. V, I want to stay with you here. I'm not familiar with this term, but they want to talk about radical ACEs.
Yeah, so ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, right? And so those are things that happen to us in our childhood that typically impact our mental health or our physical health. And so when you think about that, these ACEs are what we carry throughout our entire life. And ACEs are what we bring to the workplace. And if we think more about these things and how they've impacted our lives, the way we think, our mental health, our physical health, it really does start with who you are and recognizing that part, right? But the more that organizations and companies and they understand that this, again, relationally, human centrically, this is what people are bringing to the job, which I think is also why you see more companies offering mental health services, more companies offering coaching, more companies offering things like that, because people are people. And it's important that, especially if you're a leader, that you recognize that your team members are coming in with those things that happened long before they even made it to adulthood.
Got it. Last question here. Alvin, I'm going to go to you with this. Any thoughts on how to distinguish between being too sensitive and responding honestly and respecting where you're at?
Being too sensitive and responding honestly. I think sensitivity actually should be a barometer, I believe, especially in regards to emotional intelligence. So when people see that you're more sensitive to something, it's telling you that it has a greater impact. And so for me, when it comes to this sensitivity, I believe that we have to make sure that we are looking at how deep or how sincere this individual is in regards to that. I think also especially in the workplace, what we find is that we care a lot about the goals that we have for ourselves in regards to where we want to be. But we also have to take a dial back to say, how am I doing? Right. And I think that's really important, especially in this day and age where we're so focused. And I brought it back, that topic of John Henryism, because if you really looked at the historical information of that, it was about a farmer. His name was John Henry Adams. And basically, he was a farmer that basically worked foot over nail, just hustling, and so that he could be able to not deal with the same issues that his father had to deal with. And so him and his wife worked tirelessly for that, to the point where he got to he paid off his whole loan in a year rather than, over the course of 40 years. But yet he had problem walking because of the fact that he did not understand the fact that it was really killing his body for doing the things that he did. And so when we think about corporate America in that same sense, we have to think about not only are we doing well from just a corporate perspective, but also from our own perspective as well.
All right. I think that's a good way to lead into the close of this conversation. I'd like to offer you guys the opportunity to deliver closing remarks to the audience. Dr. V. Johnson, the EQ doctor, I will start with you, please.
I would say that something that I like to say a lot, it's usually not about you. It's just usually not about you. Whatever it is that you're experiencing from somebody else is typically about them and not you. And if anybody who knows me, I say worry about yourself. If we worry about our own emotional intelligence and how we show up in this world, then we're going to create the best environment possible, whether on the job or off the job. And please don't take emotional intelligence as the end goal. Like, I'm there and I have no more growing to do. Emotional intelligence is a constant journey. Take it day by day, step by step, and you will get to the place that you want to be in creating a more emotionally intelligent environment and in your life.
I appreciate you. Alvin, closing remarks, sir.
Yes, sir. So for me, I think my closing remark will be this, is that emotional intelligence is not about reacting, it's about responding. And I think we have to really think about how do we respond in certain situations. A lot of times we see something and we're ready to just react, but really it's about responding. And so when I think about emotional intelligence, if you want to be able to read the room, be able to navigate different places, you need to be able to respond rather than react.
I can appreciate it, and I appreciate both of you for joining us today. Thank you so very much for joining us today for this great and impactful conversation. We did it. It's Emotional Intelligence in Action, Elevating Relationships and Performance with Dr. V. Johnson and Alvin Hagen. If you want to stay connected to the work of Dr. V. Johnson, the EQ doctor, I know that our team dropped her link into the actual chat, but her website is here, Instagram, she's active, and of course she's on LinkedIn doing what she does and sharing great information. Love that video you put out for the Digital Career Success Series as well. If you want to stay connected to the work of Alvin Hagen, this man is in motion, he's moving, so you might want to lock in on that LinkedIn URL and see what's next for Dr. Hagen. I know whatever it is, he'll be amazing at it. And if you want to stay connected to the work I do here at East Coast Executives, I'm Kenneth L. Johnson. Visit the website, eastcoastexecutives.com, for all information about the work we're doing here. Also on LinkedIn, I hope that some of you connect with me today just so we can stay connected, and hopefully I can add value. And of course, I'm on Instagram as well. All right, look, you can join us next week. We're not taking any time off. We're going to do this again next week for Team Leadership Essentials. Really excited about this conversation. Chelsea Williams, Michael Hatter on, and it's going to be a great conversation next week, July 11th. So register. We plan to inspire, motivate, and exceed. And speaking about inspiring and motivating, I'm really excited and happy, and hopefully you guys are excited as well. We'll be in Cleveland for the National Urban League Conference. Please join us. There will be a virtual career networking fair on Tuesday. What is that, July 15th? But we'll also do it live in Cleveland on Wednesday. We got a special guest coming up in a couple weeks from Cleveland. So we're excited about that. We're excited to be sharing the National Urban League's presence with the great people in the state of Ohio and anybody else nationally that wants to come through and join us. So check out the website, get some information, and hopefully we'll see you in Cleveland. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Dr. V. Johnson, Alvin Hagen, you guys were both amazing. And of course, our audience, you guys were amazing as well. I'd like to give a shout out to our amazing team backstage, making us look really good actually today. Corey O'Donnell, of course, Wanda Jackson, Julius Jones, Dave Gannon, everybody at the National Urban League and the UL Jobs Network team that allows us to show up here and be successful and share information with you each and every week. Thank you so very much for joining us. We appreciate it. We hope to see you again on June 11th. Team Leadership Essentials. Inspire, motivate, succeed. I'm Kenneth L. Johnson, host of the National Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. See you next week.